Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, we are once again right slap bang in the thick, in the midst of yet another election.
Oh, you mean this is the Gaggle's Democracy Watch?
Exactly, the Democracy Watch, and there's an election in Moldova. And it's like, hey, haven't we just had elections in Moldova? But elections in Moldova follow a very familiar pattern, not just in Moldova, but the EU, which is that the party that the EU supports has no chance whatsoever of winning an election, and yet that party will
A
win the
fair
election
election. A
because
fair election. You're saying a fair election.
yes, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
An election, which one calls a reasonable and fair election. Now, we've seen this pattern over and over again, which is that the party that is supported and pushed by the EU has no chance of winning, and therefore enormous powerful governmental pressure is applied against the candidates that are likely to win in order to steal an election. Now we saw this in the presidential election in Moldova when Maia Sandu had no chance of winning, and therefore the only way that she could pull that off was through a massive intervention on the part of the EU and a denial of any election chances for the opposition. The way they pulled it off in the presidential election and in the EU referendum was that the Moldovan diaspora in Russia, quite a numerous group, were not able to vote. There were only
Oh,
two
yeah.
polling
Yeah.
stations
Let
open.
me just tell you, George, I saw it with my own eyes. I saw crowds and crowds of people in front of the Moldovan embassy, and they're not allowed to vote. They showed up.
They showed up.
It was a cold day. It's cold out,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah, yeah.
And they came out and, sorry, what are you here for? We're here to vote. And vote in what?
Right.
Okay.
That's right. So there were
I
only
mean,
two.
it's so stark.
That's right.
Okay. And before we go forward, this is not an election in Moldova. This is an EU election. Okay. We have to
Exactly.
phrase this
And
right.
that's the key. That's the key. So what we had is that in the case of the presidential election, only two polling stations were open, and there were 5,000 in each of the polling stations, 5,000 ballots. So that means only 10,000 people got to vote. Well, that's very strange because there are more than 100,000 eligible Moldovan voters
Way
living in
more.
Russia. So that's a bit of a problem. But what happened after Maia Sandu pulled off this outright theft? Immediately, the EU chimed in: fair election, free, fair election,
It
and the pro-EU party won fair and square.
juxtapose the obstacles presented to Moldovans living in Russia eligible to vote in the EU Moldovan election. I don't want to quote a number because I don't want to get it wrong, but hundreds of polling stations through Western Europe.
Exactly,
Hundreds.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly,
And I wonder who paid for that. Not
exactly.
Moldova. They didn't pay for it. Who paid for that? Okay.
That's right.
The EU. No, that's mine. Obviously, that's
That's right.
the
That's right. That's exactly right. And so what happened was that Maya Sandu, um, won, quote, won, unquote, and it was immediately hailed as the great victory for democracy. And of course, we saw the same thing in Romania when basically they had a problem on the EU had a problem on his hands, which is Georgescu, the guy that they didn't want, was on the brink of election victory. So he had to be prevented from running. And so they had to basically just annul the election. That's it. Boom.
and not allow him to run in
And then when they had the runoff, they didn't allow him to run. Well, that's that. That's the way you do it. And of course, now this pattern is being repeated throughout Europe because soon after we had the case of Marine Le Pen. The court ruled a kind of Mickey Mouse corruption case. and decided, no, she can't run in the next presidential election when she's actually ahead in the polls. And now you're seeing the same thing that's happening in Germany, where recently in Ludwigshafen, the mayoral election, the Alternative for Deutschland candidate was simply prevented from running. Why? Oh, they decided that he's an enemy of the Constitution. Okay, so that's good. So you're an enemy of the Constitution. Boom, he can't run. And now, so this is now de rigueur within the EU, which is the only way we can win these elections is by banning the parties that we don't want. But that way you can do it. Hey, that's a neat idea. You can always win an election if your opponents are prevented from running.
And of course, the Sandu and her allies, they presented this as a civilizational choice.
Of course.
Isn't that kind of familiar? That's what they said in Ukraine.
That's
Okay.
exactly right. Now, what happened
Okay. I mean, you have to remember, everyone, it's a lot closer to me because there are hundreds of thousands of Moldovans that live in Moscow, not just Russia, in Moscow. Okay. Why are they here? Is it for the weather, George? No, it's not for the weather. Okay. Is it for the wine? No, it's not for the wine. It's because it's a place where they can work. Okay. And they send remittances back home. Why aren't they working in Moldova? George asks me. Well, I reply to George, is because the place is so corrupt. Okay.
right?
And so, I mean, I've mentioned many times, if you're Armenian and you're talented, don't stay in Armenia. If you're talented and you're from Moldova, they leave because they have a better chance outside of their own country.
Right.
Okay, and so it's about corruption, the promises of reform that don't come. Oh, but Sandu, she's dining out in Paris. Okay,
Right.
and the great halls in Europe. Okay, and people are saying, you promise change. Now, and it's very important. This tip is this is an anti-Russia election,
But
and they
this is
preyed upon fears.
right.
And
Well,
what
now
they
that
and then one last word sentence is that the parties that the West support, front and center, is their position on Ukraine. And the Moldovans say, "Hey, it didn't look like it worked out too that well for them. Why should we be part of it?" Go ahead.
well, that's the point. The only way that essentially these political parties like the ones in Romania who won eventually and Maia Sandu, the only way they can perform their massive political repression is by claiming that Russia is trying to interfere in our election. Russia is trying to steal our election. We have to do what we do because of Russia. And that was what Maia Sandu has done.
Yeah.
So Maia Sandu has basically just banned political parties from running. So here's a story that is just broken. The two political parties were banned from running. Moldova bars pro-Russia party from parliamentary elections. That's convenient. With about 48 hours to go, they just ban a pro-Russia. This is always the way the media present
Yeah,
it.
man. I mean,
It's
again,
pro-Russia.
yeah, George and I have been covered this ground many times before. Okay, this is Deutsche Welle, one of the worst, or as
Yeah.
Trump would say, a real beauty. Um, uh, So it's Deutsche Welle telling you that this opposition party is pro-Russia.
Mhm.
Okay, they're telling you.
Yeah.
This is not a description.
No.
This is a proscription. They're saying
Yeah.
this is how we see it. Okay,
Right.
this is how propaganda works. Okay, they have labeled it for the reader.
Yeah.
Now, if you would have said opposition party barred from from parliamentary election, and then you go into the article and you say, well, maybe we'll find out why they were barred. No, from the get-go. I mean,
There's no
almost to the point. What's the point of reading this article?
No, there was no point. But you're absolutely right, because if they'd said Moldova bars opposition party from parliamentary election, then a reader says, well, that doesn't sound good. That doesn't sound very democratic. That doesn't sound like a country we want in the EU, let alone fast track into the EU. But if you say pro-Russia party, well, that's good. Well, obviously they're pro-Russia. Then they're obviously just simply agents of the Kremlin. Oh, that's fine. Yeah, go ahead. ban it. That's the reason. That's why they always have to say, "Oh, it's pro-Russia," because otherwise people will think, "Well, what's democracy got to do with this?"
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's the Heart of Moldova party. What does that have to do with Russia? I mean, it sounds like a pro-Russia party, doesn't it,
That's
George?
right. Exactly. That's absolutely right. Exactly. The Heart of Moldova part was barred from it. Exactly. That's exactly right. Um, Over allegations of voter bribery, illegal party financing, and money laundering. They're always coming up with these things. Remember the in Gagauzia, the province of Gagauzia, where it's 100%. They don't vote for Maia Sandu. They absolutely hate Maia. They can't find a single person there who would vote for Maia Sandu. Well, the governor, by happy coincidence, has been convicted in a Moldovan court of, yes, corruption. Or you always bring this out, and of course, getting money from Russia, the usual
Yeah, but
palaver.
I mean, it's no secret uh, where Maia Sandu gets her money in her political party.
Right.
The European Union can pour in millions and millions of euros, and it's never reported,
No, of course.
ever.
That's right. That's right. Um,
I mean, what was it? I mean, it was Macron,
yep, that's right.
Merz,
Exactly. They
and
came
Tusk. All three of them showed up at
That's
once,
right.
I
It was
think.
a kind of a few weeks ago. Yeah,
Yeah.
Macron, Merz, and Tusk. They all said this is an existential choice for Moldova. It's always an existential choice, existential choice. And you're absolutely right. That's exactly what they did at the time of Maidan. They all showed up in Kiev and saying Kiev needs to make an existential choice. Is it with the East or is it with the West? And so here it says this: the Moldova Central Election Commission on Friday, so that's within 48 hours, excluded the pro-Russia party Heart of Moldova from participating in the upcoming parliamentary elections this weekend. You also have to keep in mind, if you do it at this late stage, basically the ballot papers have already been printed. So the party is already on the ballot paper. So people will go in, vote for that party, and then those votes won't count. Oh, well, hey, we're going to basically annul those votes. So that's effectively good for Maia Sandu because that's, well, hey, these votes don't count. They're disqualified. That's the advantage of springing it in the last minute because
Well, see, and also
the ballot's already printed.
exactly. And so there's so many levels of machination going on here because let's say you're a Moldovan voter and you say, I'm going to vote for this party
Right.
because I think it's my party and what right do they have to do that? And so you invalidate your vote. And
Yep.
that's exactly what Sandu wants. Okay,
Yes.
they just say, oh, this is a tainted
That's right. Exactly.
ballot. Right,
Disqualified.
and
Yeah.
that's one, and it's a vote not against her. Okay.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly that's the great advantage of pulling this in the last minute. And then said, well, Heart of Moldova members will be removed from the list of candidates, giving its parent political bloc 24 hours to adjust the list to meet the representation thresholds required by electoral law. 24 hours. Well, thank you. And then you pull this sort of stuff, and the OSCE, we know that the OSCE is going to say, yep, free and fair. Anyone else to say you pull this shit 24 hours before an election? That's it. It invalidates the
Yeah,
election.
but see, this kind of procedure, it tells you everything you need to know, is that they cannot win on
Exactly.
arguments. They
That's right.
can't win on arguments.
That's right.
So
Exactly.
they have to sabotage the procedure,
Right.
okay?
Right.
And by sabotaging the procedure, they're showing that they have no faith in the
No,
process.
no, of course they don't. And they're right. They don't have a faith in the process because they cannot win. They simply cannot win. They saw what happened in Romania. They were not going to win. And so the move to bar. But one should also say, incidentally, that Moldova has barred election observers entering the country. So this is just election observers. So any election observers from Russia that have been barred from entering Moldova. Now, they're just election observers. Russia is a member of the OSCE. You may think Maia Sandu may not like the fact that Russia is a member of the OSCE. Russia is a member of the OSCE. The OSCE voter election monitoring mission, Russia is entitled to take part in the election monitoring mission. And there were other NGOs from other parts of the world who were also banned from entering the country. But again, you know, the OSCE will declare tomorrow, yep, it was free and fair, no problem at all. Um, and so the move to bar Heart of Moldova from the election comes after a court ruling limited the party's activities for 1 year, as it has been the subject of an investigation into illegal party financing. The election on Sunday is a highly critical test for Moldova, and says the current ruling party, the pro-European Party of Action and Solidarity, has held a strong parliamentary majority since 2021, but it now faces a bloc of 4 Russia-friendly parties, of which Heart of Moldova was a part of. So that's gone. That was that.
Okay, and I don't
Thank you.
know. I don't know if it's in this particular article, but I like to point out, just because I don't want to forget, is that months before this election, the pro-European Party of Action and Solidarity was in the doldrums. It was doing very, very badly.
Right.
One public opinion poll after another. Okay, but so far that hasn't been mentioned
No, no,
here.
no, no. They can never do. Um, and then there's always the stuff. It's always like the media reports this stuff without the slightest critical approach.
Russia has spent hundreds of millions of
Hundreds
euros.
of millions
No,
of
it
euros.
hasn't. They don't. No,
That is a lot of money.
that's not.
Hundreds of
No,
billions of euros.
that no. They just don't. They don't spend money like that. I'm
No, they
sorry.
do
I live
not.
here.
They
I
do
know
not.
that.
To sway
But
the out.
I would strongly argue that the EU has spent hundreds of millions of euros.
Look, that's on the record. I mean, that's not even in dispute. When they make these claims, Russia has spent hundreds of millions of euros. What, can you present some evidence? They never present any evidence.
Well, what do they do? Have a secret SWIFT system? I mean, what do they do? Carrying it in
Yeah,
on
that's right.
horseback?
But yeah, that's exactly by.
Is this the Pony Express or what?
But officials in Moldova, and they just report this uncritically. Well, if an official in Moldova told me, must be true. Moscow has repeatedly denied meddling in Moldova's politics. Now, whenever they do this is the media always do this. They say Moscow denies interference. This is just a throwaway line they put in order to suggest that they're doing some serious journalism.
Well, this is
But
very
we
balanced.
went to both. We listened to both sides.
This is very objective, George.
Exactly. Well, Moscow has repeated. So Moscow denies, involvement in corruption. Okay, fine. And then we'll go on with the rest of the story. Um, and then it says earlier this month, Heart of Moldova party members were subject to searches that led to allegations of voter bribery, illegal party financing, and money laundering. Allegations led to allegations. So they were subject to searches and then led to allegations. Okay, well, you can allege
So
anything you like.
based on an allegation,
Exactly.
political
Led to
party is
allegations. Oh,
banned.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Based on an
Oh,
allegation.
that's a very interesting legal system.
That's right. That's right. Um, then it says party leader Irina Vla was also sanctioned by several EU member states this week on suspicion of assisting Russian interference. So she gets sanctioned by several EU member states on suspicion of assisting Russian interference. What's it got to do with even if it's true? What's it got to do with them? Why are you sanctioning her? Um, you know, because of whatever she's involved in Moldovan politics. She
Yeah,
therefore
but also everybody keep in mind, the sanction is the process of sanctioning is very pernicious because you can be sanctioned, but you have no recall. You can't say, hey, well, why? Well,
no,
why
no,
you
no, no, you
you
can't.
you have no recourse. You have no legal recourse.
That's
You
right.
are sanctioned. That
Right.
means you've been deleted.
That's right.
Okay. You have no recourse to say, can you justify your
Right.
sanction against me? You have no recourse.
Right.
Okay.
That's right. That's right. That's right. She's been banned from entering Latvia, Estonia, and Poland, where she has been accused of helping the Russian Federation interfere in the preparation for the parliamentary election. But
Why
notice,
Latvia, Estonia, and Poland?
but it's also it's very, very interesting where they all know what's best for Moldova. Therefore, they already know that those in Moldova who want to maintain good relations with Russia, they don't count. So they always say, well, Moldova, well, that's pro EU, it's pro Western orientation. Well, what about those in Moldova who are not happy with that? They just don't count. It's the same thing. It was exactly the same thing with Ukraine. Well, what about those in Ukraine who didn't want to go down the EU path? They didn't want to go and join the European security and defense procedure. What about those? Oh, they don't count. It's a civilizational choice. You just have to go with us. So those people don't matter. So they demonize this guy Igor Dodon. All Dodon does is say we should have better relations with Russia, but that makes him just a sort of a Moscow agent.
Yeah, well,
Of course,
considering
he's also been is under house arrest, so that's
when you have a country like Moldova where a significant percentage of its ethnic population lives in a foreign country, yeah, you probably want to have good relations with
right.
them. That would make
Right.
sense, wouldn't it?
Right. That's right. But you also have people, like Gagauzia. They don't want to what Maia Sandu is selling. They want nothing to do with any of that. And then of course you have the Transnistria. They don't want to have anything to do with that. But none of that counts. As far as when the EU is
Okay.
concerned.
Just as not as a sneak preview, but kind of as a morbid teaser. Um, Take it to the bank, everybody. George and I are going to be talking about Transnistria a lot in the near future. Keep going,
That's
George.
right. And then here's Reuters. Moldova bans another pro-Russian party. Moldovan election authority excluded the pro-Russian political party Greater Moldova. As you said, that sounds really pro-Russian. Greater
Well,
Moldova.
I mean, how about this? I mean, the Republican Party is pro-Israel, so should they be banned from elections? I mean, look at it's the same logic
That's
here.
right.
I mean, well, the Democratic Party, its leadership is pro-Israel. Does that invalidate their role in elections? I mean, what's wrong with being pro-Russia? Uh,
Exactly. In a democracy, supposedly, issues are settled by the ballot box. You have to say ultimately it's going to be decided on who has the most votes. If this party has the more votes than that party, then this party forms the next
here,
government. That
here
doesn't
we
work that's not EU logic. No, no, no.
yeah.
That's not how it works in the
Here
EU.
we have another one of these really profoundly pro-Russian parties called Greater Moldova.
That's right. Yes. The decision was made late on Friday, of course. It is the second pro-Russian party to be excluded within days of the vote, amid concerns over alleged Russian interference. This amid concerns. They just repeat this, oh, you banned an opposition political party amid concerns over alleged Russian interference and so EU aspirations.
It'll be very curious, George. I mean, because we're so geeky about it. So we have allegations against two political parties. Does those allegations go anywhere after the election? I mean, is there a continued
Well, I think
investigation,
that's a
or,
very
or do they just say, "Oh, never mind"?
no. I would think first of all the allegations will continue after the election, but and this is the important point. I think she will succeed in stealing this election. I mean, she's pulled it. She's done it before. But if for any reason she fails, I mean, you have to be a real imbecile with all this going. You still can't eke out a victory. But if for some reason it doesn't go her way, there will, without question, be a crackdown. They will crack down on all of the opposition political party, and they will probably cancel the election.
Oh, of
They
course,
cancel the election result.
of course. I
Uh,
mean, it's the Zelensky option. Yeah.
Exactly. They'll cancel the election result, and the EU will say, well, of course, yeah, absolutely, you had to cancel it because of Russian interference. Russian interference was so intense that we had to cancel the election. So yeah, but I guess if she does pull this off, yeah, I think these political parties will be banned. I mean, they've done this now. Many political parties have been already been banned in Moldova. It's a
Now
growing list of banned political parties.
exactly, and now the EU is not ashamed of it. It's the a recognized procedure. We don't like the outcome. We're going to cancel the election, and they'll do it with a straight face.
Absolutely.
Okay. And
Absolutely.
actually, they'll be very proud of it.
Very proud. Look, I mean, look what happened in Romania. I mean, that was the first. I don't think there's
Ever.
ever been a case when an election is just simply cancelled 48 hours before. Just simply say, well, because the wrong candidate was going to win, so we just canceled the election. And the EU said, yeah, great, because Russia, Russia, we'll figure out later what exactly Russia was doing, but yeah, absolutely cancel it. Um,
It's from what George and I have been able to discern, because we obviously keep an eye on these things here. They're going to really have to rig it big time. This is going to be big time rigging.
big time.
I mean, because again, these news outlets are so fundamentally dishonest. The Sandu's parties and her allies were doing very badly in the run up to this. There's no mention of this
No,
whatsoever.
no,
Because if there was a mention of this, then you'd say, maybe there's something going on here. You're
right,
not doing well in the polls, and
right,
you ban your opposition.
right,
See, that would educate the
right.
reader, but they don't want to
No, they
do
don't want.
that.
They don't want to do the most that they'll admit. Well, the economy isn't doing well, but that, of course, is Russia's
I
fault.
saw that right before we convened. Yeah, but it's sluggish. Yeah. And
Economy is not doing well, but it's
promised
Russia. It's
reform,
Russia's fault. Russia's cut off its cheap.
promised
Yeah,
reforms, and
yeah, cheap source of energy. Russia had basically used its used gas as a weapon against Moldova, and that's why
which
Moldova
is
economy.
completely untrue. Which
It's
is
completely untrue.
completely untrue.
Completely untrue. Oh yeah, they use gas as a weapon. That's why Moldova is in a dire economic strait. And of course, Russia is exploiting the situation. The way Russia is. um, and then so we have the election authority found that the party had used unprecedented financial resources. Oh, is it
Unreported.
unreported? Exactly. Unreported financial resources and was suspected of providing voters with money in an attempt to sway the outcome. I love the way it's suspected. Either they did provide voters with money
Everyone,
or they didn't.
let me burst your bubble here, everybody. All through that region, there are envelopes passed.
Right.
Everybody does it. A quick story. I was covering an election prior to 2014. Personally, I was covering it in Kiev. And we were there with our camera crews and we were filming. We were there like 4 or 5 days. And so we went to the protests. And there was this guy wearing a NASA t-shirt. That's why I could easily remember it. And he was at one of these pro EU parties demonstration. And then a day later, I saw the guy. He was with the opposition, and he was wearing still the NASA t-shirt. And I asked one of my handlers. I said, "Well, weren't you with the other guys yesterday?" And he openly said, "Yeah, but these people pay me more."
Yeah. Um, yeah, that's right. Officials also suspect that the party was acting as a successor to the previously outlawed party led by pro-Russian fugitive business tycoon Ilan Shor. There's always a moment when they have to bring up Ilan Shor. Shor, who denies all wrongdoing, lives in Moscow. And so it's
Yeah,
a
well, let's just say a business tycoon is in the mix. Where isn't a business
well,
tycoon
that's
not
right.
in the
That's
mix in
that's
elections?
right. Yeah,
Elon Musk, hello?
yeah, no, that's right.
Okay.
That's exactly right. And there's a business tycoon that was extradited to Moldova from Greece the other day. It's amazing how these courts are so happy to cooperate in what is basically it's a political extradition. I mean, Greece had no business extraditing this tycoon because obviously the Moldovan government was persecuting the tycoon for political reasons, and that violates all principles of extradition. And yet Greece just simply handed him over to the Moldovan authorities. No one
That's what
says boo about that.
that's what we call telephone justice.
Exactly.
Somebody got a call.
That's it.
Yes,
Exactly.
sir.
That's right. And then Sunday's parliamentary vote is seen as a turning point for Moldova. And it says,
Oh, no, seen by whom?
That's
I
by
mean,
us, by us.
is
The media.
God
Yeah,
says this is a turning? I mean, look at the kind of sentence construction. Is seen as by whom?
that's right. Oh, that's always, yeah, they always do it in that
Yeah.
passive voice. That's the whole point of using the passive voice, is that you don't have to say who the actor is. But of course, it just shows that you have this bubble of media, EU bureaucracy, and essentially political elites, and they are the ones who just set the agenda and say that this is a make or break election for Moldova. And
No, it's a make or break election for Maya Sandu.
well, for the no, it's for the EU.
No,
If
she is her.
yeah,
I agree
because
with
she
you.
works for
She's
the
the surrogate of the EU, of course.
exactly, because if the EU loses, then it's a humiliation. I mean, I mean, if you've thrown the amount of resources that you've thrown into it, this election, and you still can't pull it off, then that's a big, big embarrassment for you. So that's why now have to absolutely
Okay, all
pull
right.
it
Now
off.
they finally say it, but polls show the House might lose a majority. Okay,
Might
here we
lose a majority, as opposition parties court voters concerned about the high cost of living, rising poverty, and a sluggish economy. Well, these things happen. That's what happens in a democracy. If you have high cost of living, rising poverty, and a sluggish economy, voters are going to vote against you.
Well,
That
but
has
isn't
nothing
it
to do with Russia. Where's Russia in all of that?
absolutely? So now we can read seen as a turning point for Moldova because of the high cost of living,
Rising
rising
poverty and a
poverty, and a
sluggish
sluggish
economy.
economy.
Yeah. So where's Russia? What's Russia got to do with that? Um, Having to govern in a coalition could complicate the Sandu's effort to get Moldova into EU by 2030.
They will never. Moldova will never be part of the EU,
I don't think so.
ever.
I don't think so. And then they, and then I love this the throwaway line at the end. Russia says it does not interfere in the internal affairs of other countries. So they just put that in. Hey, now we've done some serious journalism here. We
Yeah,
we got
and
the other side of the case.
and Jim Comey says I did everything by the book.
Exactly. That's right. Now this is Pavel Durov, who,
Oh yes, yes, I
as
saw
we
that.
know, Pavel Durov is currently under arrest in France. I mean, he's still there living in Paris, and he is awaiting trial, and he has to report to a police station. I think twice a week he has to report to a police station, and so he sent out this telegram today saying about a year ago, while I was stuck in Paris, the French intelligence services reached out to me through an intermediary, asking me to help the Moldovan government censor certain telegram channels ahead of the presidential elections in Moldova. After reviewing the channels flagged by French and Moldovan authorities, we identified the few that clearly violated our rules and removed them. The intermediary then informed me that in exchange for this cooperation, French intelligence would say good things about me to the judge who had ordered my arrest in August last
You
year.
know, it's so interesting, George. You know that you can see what's going to happen here. So, we can talk to the
Well, that's
judge,
right. Yes, yes,
and as an act of good faith,
that's right.
maybe you could, delete these guys. Thank you very much.
But
But we have a parliamentary election coming up. We might have to knock on your door
right,
again.
right, right.
You
But
see how this goes. Okay, it never ends.
right. Notice, however, first of all, Durov admits he cooperated.
Yes.
He said, remember he did the whole song and dance, and he's not going to cooperate with governments and so on. He cooperated. He said we identified a few that clearly violated our rules and removed them. Now I'm quite sure that they didn't go to him. We're worried about these child pornography sites. There's an awful lot of child pornography sites in Moldova. Do you think you could take them down for us, please? No, of course that's not. The child pornography thing is they always bring that up. But the reality is, it is political censorship. It's political censorship that they're interested in. Not child pornography. But he cooperated. Having said that, you don't, Telegram, we absolutely, if you want privacy, then hey, this is the place for you. Anyway, then he goes on. This was unacceptable on several levels. If the agency did in fact approach the judge, it constituted an attempt to interfere in the judicial process. Duh. So yeah, it really did. If it did not, I mean, what does he think he's been doing in France all this time? He's there because they want to apply pressure against him. They want to make sure that Telegram plays by their rules. If it did not and merely claimed to have done so, then it was exploiting my legal situation in France to influence political developments in Eastern Europe, a pattern we have also observed in Romania. And he's already written about that, what they did to Telegram. They tried to do the same thing in Romania with Telegram. Shortly thereafter, the Telegram team received a second list of so-called problematic Moldovan channels. Second list, all right. All child pornography. Unlike the first, nearly all of these channels were legitimate and fully compliant with our rules. Their only commonality was that they voiced political positions disliked by the French and Moldovan governments. We refused to act on this request. Telegram is committed to freedom of speech, no, it's not, and will not remove content for political reasons. I will continue to expose every attempt to pressure Telegram into censoring our platform. Stay tuned. Again, fine words, butter no parsnips. I mean, he clearly did cooperate and has cooperated with the French intelligence services. So he's not committed to freedom of speech, but probably, what they were demanding was really egregious. I mean, probably say, can you please take down all the political parties' Telegram channels, just about every party other than Maia Sandu's party? I, I'm just simply not impressed by Durov. Anyway, so then we have the BBC. Moldova holds key elections. Russia's shadow looms large. And here, this is the opening paragraph. This week, Moldovan police and prosecutors disclosed evidence of election interference on an unprecedented scale. Disclosed evidence. So police and prosecutors in Moldova, they come, present you with something or other in a language you don't even understand. And you say, oh, that's pretty dire. Evidence of election interference on an unprecedented scale. Vote buying and disinformation that they link directly to Russia. They've also uncovered a plot to foment violent unrest, detaining dozens of men who traveled to Serbia. It's always good when they bring Serbia into the mix, for training, including the use of firearms. Opposition.
You can't train with firearms in Moldova.
No. And apparently not even in Romania. You can't even get, you have to go all the way down to Serbia, which is not particularly close to to Moldova. I don't know how they get there. It's a long way to go.
Yeah, well,
Trade.
look at this here. I mean, look at fomenting violent
Yep.
unrest. Wow, this is scary. Scary. Look at this. This is exactly how they inflame things. Yeah, I mean, yeah, to be slightly more honest, um, the current ruling political party is feeling the pressure, as it is exhibited in its slagging poll numbers.
Right.
Okay, that kind of sets the stage
Right.
about the election contest here, but we know nothing about that. How many people make it to the third paragraph, George?
No one. Very, very few.
Except for you.
Yes, exactly. It's I mean, this is always the classic in journalism. No one goes b below the fold. I mean, it's so, and let alone anyone turns the page. I mean, that used to be the case, obviously, before online journalism, which is, hey, people only read the headline. Some go beyond the headline, but very, very few go below the fold, and hardly anyone, 0.01% of the readership actually turns the page to where the rest of the story continues, where, of course, you bury the lead. That's where you dump the key admission, knowing no one is actually going to read that. Um, anyway, but the interesting thing is about the violent unrest, which is they're hedging their bets. This is their insurance policy because there is a possibility they're going to cancel the election. I mean, if
Yes,
it
and
goes wrong,
it will be the state using violence.
exactly. That's the point. It'll be the state using violence because they figure, well, there'll probably be people who will protest. The people will protest. I mean, if you cancel an election, then people are a little unhappy about that. Um, but Moldova took a decisive turn towards EU membership and away from Moscow after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Now the evidence suggests Russia has been investing heavily in restoring its influence. The evidence. We've seen all the evidence. And it's trying to claw back. Claw, that's the use of the word claw. Um,
God, the BBC is just so
It's
shameless.
disgusting. It really, like, again, as you put it, quoting Trump, it's another beauty. The only documented efforts to warp Moldova's elections so far have been by Russia. Warp. So we've
War.
had claw and now we've had warp. And then they say, this is one of the most advanced interference campaigns we've seen. Who says this? Police chief. Well, that's good. Well, let's listen to what the police chief has to say. I mean, that's always a reliable source of information. It's also bigger. At last year's presidential elections, he says people were being paid up to $40 to vote for pro-Russian forces who then came close to winning. We calculate that Russia invested more than $100 million overall last year, the police chief tells me. Now it's more than three
Okay, well,
times that amount.
okay. Again, splashing cash around is nothing new for these countries. Okay, how many people were paid to vote for the pro government party? Were they paid too?
Uh,
And they never mention these
no,
things.
they never. Look, 100 million is a ridiculous sum of money. I mean,
It's
Moldova is
just
a very small country. If you start throwing around 100 million, I mean, that means that comes to about $50 per person. That's a lot of money, $50 to every man, woman, and child. So imagine you have a family of four. Well, that's nice. That's $200 for us. I mean, it doesn't happen. So now it's more than three times that amount. And then here's Al Jazeera.
yes, I read this one earlier
All
today.
right,
Yes.
exactly. Moldova bans pro-Russian party ahead of Sunday's election, and so this is we talked about that, and uh, this is the decision against the heart of Moldova followed a ruling by the Chisinau Court of Appeal that restricted the party's activities for 12 months. The Ministry of Justice requested the ban after searches early this month led to accusations and so on. Um, and then the Electoral Commission said all candidates put forward by Heart of Moldova would be removed. And then they said later that they thought this is the Greater Moldova Party, vote buying and so on. But again, as I say, so you've got two parties, their candidates, the ballot paper's already done. So many people would simply not know when they vote that these parties have now been banned. So they will just put their cross, and those votes will be discounted. Well, that's very convenient. Um, and here's the Guardian, and this is the usual drama:
Oh
Moldova's
God,
election,
usual drama. Jeez.
pro-Europe or pro-Russia.
Yeah, but see, this is something, this reinforces something that I've said for a long time. You know, and you look at Deutsche Welle, you look at The Guardian, and you look at these Western publications. the world in the West, democracy's been turned into a secular religion. Well,
Right.
look at this here, a choice between two paths. It's existential, civilizational choice. Let me tell you something, everybody. For the vast number of people in the world, elections are a procedure.
Okay.
It's not a religious act. But in the West, they elevate it to that because anything is justified in the name of this secular religion because it is something much bigger than us. And
Right,
some
but yes,
we mere humans can barely understand it, okay? And that's why when this is rigged and tomorrow George and I do our live stream, we're gonna say, well, I hope everybody watched today's program.
that's right. No, yeah, but that's right. But what's the reason why the West has done this is that the West is unable to win these elections. The
Got
pro-West
it.
and pro-Europe, they can't win these elections. So therefore, every time there's an election, I mean, they're not happy about it, but they have to have elections. They have to elevate it to this existential choice, and there's the enemy that's lurking. That if you don't vote the right way, there will be this horrible, monstrous creature that is going to steal your country away from you. But what the EU is doing here, and this is the why their interference is so outrageous, is they're clearly threatening Moldova. If you don't vote for Maia Sandu, you're not going to get anything from us. No money for anything, no subsidies, no nothing. So that's a direct interference. Hey, we gave you all this money all these years while Maia Sandu was running things. You don't think you're going to get a penny from us if you vote the wrong way. I mean, that is the most outrageous interference. But they're doing it
Yeah,
by saying this.
and
Well, it's
because
either pro-Europe or pro-Russia. So if you
right,
go down the pro-Russia path, you're not getting a penny from us.
and it is a not so veiled threat. You've been paid. We all agree. Now you're bought.
That's right.
See, they're saying you've been paid. That means you've been bought.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Western friendly ruling party faces fierce challenge from opposition amid reports of Kremlin interference.
You know,
And
Moldovans, they're just a simple folk, okay? They,
that's,
you know, they toil in the fields and they'll be told what to do by their masters. They
that's
have such a pathetic view
right.
of
No,
agency, of people that they don't understand
right,
and that they demand allegiance from
right.
because we need you for the Ukraine project. You
That's right.
got the message?
That's right. That's right. And that's it. And I think um, what they've now done with this is again the pro-West, is that they've turned these elections into quite terrifying prospects because ultimately, if you go vote the wrong way, it's not just you're going to lose this EU money, but there is a very strong likelihood that the election will be annulled. And there is a very strong likelihood that there will be a massive crackdown on all political parties, all opposition politicians. So this is really the way that these elections have now become quite scary. If you don't vote the right way, hey, you can all sorts of nasty things are going to happen. Now we've seen also in other like in Belarus, you have the renter mob that comes out. Hey, uh, we got, Lukashenko. Yeah, he got, 90% of the vote. Oh, he stole the election. Quite how you can get from 90%. Oh, he obviously lost the election. Yes, he got 90%. How,
Yeah,
how, how are you going to
my
get from 90 down to less than 50?
Yeah, my usual retort to these accusations from coming from the West is, and it's an easy one. So, who did win the election?
Exactly. That's exactly right. Who did win? Exactly. That's right. Um, and so here it was. And then here we have if Sandu's party loses badly, Sandu may be forced to share power with Dodon, who could become prime minister. Dodon has spent time under house arrest on corruption charges. So again, the Guardian still thinks, but don't you think there's something wrong with these two sentences? This is the opposition leader of the opposition, and he spent time under house arrest on corruption charges. And that's leave aside the governor of Gagauzia, who was also basically, she's been sentenced to prison, 7 years in prison.
Again, and the next sentence starts, the pro-Russia alliance. That's not how they see it in
I
Moldova.
don't
See,
think so.
this is a Western characterization, framing of this election. What the opposition is about is that they don't want to have bad relations with Russia because so many of their relatives work there. They've seen what's gone on with Ukraine. They don't want to have anything to do with that. And the government hasn't made good on its promises. So no, we're done with this lady and
Right. That's right.
her Western handlers. That's how you characterize this election. But
Right.
no, this is, they go straight the pro-Russia line. That's not how it's perceived there.
Right. Right. That's right. That's right. And so Moldovan authorities say Moscow has funneled billions of dollars. Oh, now we're on to billions. We've reached the billions of dollars into pro-Russian parties. I just love these sums.
That
The
is
sums
just
just
that
keep
is
increasing.
it's just not fathomable. I mean, that's just billions.
Billions. You got billions. Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Uh,
we should check what is the gross national product of Moldova?
I would have thought, if you put that much money, Moldovans will have become a very prosperous people.
A new Switzerland.
Exactly. And then last week, authorities carried out 250 raids and detained dozens of suspects as part of an investigation into an alleged Russian-backed plot to incite mass riots around the
So,
election.
again, everyone here. Okay, this there's whoever writes it, they have no sense of self-reflection. Last week, the authorities, the state
That's right.
is conducting raids against the political opposition. Doesn't any bells go off?
No, exactly.
Don't you see
No, exactly. That's the
red
point. No bells
shining
go
in your
off. Yeah,
face?
yeah, exactly. No bells go off. And then a Reuters investigation revealed on Wednesday how Moscow has recruited and paid dozens of priests in the deeply religious nation to urge congregations to vote against pass.
I can tell you this, Moscow doesn't have to pay any priests in Moldova.
I,
Okay.
yeah, but what I also love is notice how Reuters and I think all of the media are essentially playing this game of essentially acting as agents of the Moldovan government, and that means the agents of the Western intelligence services. Oh, a Reuters investigation is why doesn't Reuters investigate these raids and who exactly was raided? What did they find in these raids? Reuters doesn't go, well, a Reuters investigation revealed Moscow recruited.
I wonder if Reuters is going to do an investigation into the detainment of George Galloway as he was returning to his country of birth.
Right.
Is there a Reuters investigation there? I
No,
doubt it.
no. And said, yes, that's right. And paid dozens of priests in the deep. How do they know Moscow recruited this? I mean, I love this. Like, Reuters revealed this. How do they reveal it? What is the mechanism of they know that it was Moscow recruited and paid dozens of priests? I mean, did you you bugging the Orthodox Church, in Moscow. I mean, how do they find this out?
Yeah, well,
That Moscow recruited dozens of priests.
this is this part and parcel of, again, Western framing of countries like Moldova and Romania and Georgia. They're just backward religious people.
Right.
It's such a condescending framing all the time, and it works because who reads this slop? Liberals.
Exactly. That's right. Um, and then it says Russia's SVR, Foreign Intelligence Service, released a statement this week claiming NATO forces were gathering in Romania and were prepared to occupy Moldova after the vote if the crude falsifications of elections being prepared in Brussels and Chisinau led to unrest. And then the SVR, which has a history of making provocative and unsourced claims about Western plans, did not provide any evidence for the statement, though it is evidence of how concerned Moscow is about events in Moldova. Now, whenever they write this, didn't provide any evidence. You haven't provided any evidence of anything. I mean, you have provided no evidence whatsoever of this Moscow interference in these elections, and Moscow,
Well,
providing billions of dollars and so on. You've
okay.
provided no evidence, but suddenly, well, the SVR provided no evidence for its assertions. We're being scrupulous journalists.
Well, George, can you let's see here. Go back a slide.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. So, Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service released a statement this week claiming NATO forces were gathering in Romania and were prepared to occupy Moldova after the vote if the quote crude falsification of elections being prepared in Brussels. Okay, in a way, this is kind of like they're tipping their hand. Okay, um, I'm not going to judge the veracity of that claim one way or another, but it's interesting you've kind of opened the Overton window a bit more. Is that, well, if things don't go the right way, there
Right.
could be trouble.
No,
Could be
absolutely. All
it's very much preparing
yeah,
everyone.
no, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. All of these stories about, they were preparing, violent unrest, and so on. Well, that sounds like you already have a particular scenario in mind. That's why you're suddenly warning about this. Oh, these pro-Russian opposition, they're likely to, get violent unrest. Why would they do that? Why
Okay,
would
well,
they?
George, okay, so we have all of this drone stuff going on, everybody's yakking about. Well,
Right.
let me set this up for you. I'm not saying I'm not going to give the percentages of this, how likely or unlikely the following could happen, but we have the election is chaotic, um, um, accusations of fraud on both sides, blah blah blah. Okay, and then you have NATO forces at the request of the government in Chisinau for assistance. How is that going to be? Russia has invaded Moldova. Okay. This is, again, George and I almost stand alone. Is that don't be fooled.
Right.
Escalation is in the air,
I
and expansion of the Ukraine project is in the air. I already warned everyone. George and I are going to be talking about Transnistria a lot in the near future. Mark my words, okay? And this will say, oh, through this Russian interference, they have invaded the country.
Right. Yeah, no question. No question. That, I don't take very seriously often what SVR says, but in this case, I think this is a plausible scenario. I mean, they're not saying this will happen, but it is a plausible scenario if this election really doesn't go,
Okay, all right.
according.
Or let me put it to you this way, George. Sandu that says, all right, we'll go forward with the election. We're not going to cancel it. Okay. We're gonna rough this one, tough it out. But I need your guarantees.
Right.
Okay. I'll go forward and do your bidding. Make sure protect your investment, but you better have some people on the tarmac in Romania just in case. Okay. And
No, that's
do they keep their word? I don't know. Look what they told Saakashvili. Yeah, go ahead. Go to South Ossetia. We're right behind you. Okay.
well, yeah, but this is a bit different. It would be much easier to do to occupy Moldova. I mean, why wouldn't they? I mean, absolutely very easy
I
to do.
agree.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
agree.
yeah,
That's why
yeah.
I'm not going to put a percentage on it. Okay.
Right.
But I'm
No,
just
I
saying,
think that's very plausible. I think that Maia Sandu, she's been making these trips to Brussels quite frequently in recent weeks, and I'm sure, yeah, she discussed these matters with them and said, hey, these poll numbers are not looking good, and they could, I could well end up, humiliated. And what happens then? And then Dodon becomes prime minister. Well, we can't have that. Well, I'm not going to allow it, but then I need support from you. I need
and
absolutely, because
and
otherwise, if she doesn't, basically they're going to lose control of Moldova. That's what they don't want to do.
and let's and look. What George and I are talking cold turkey here. Oh, they couldn't cancel an election in a EU country. Come on, that's impossible. Well, they did it.
They did it. Of course they did.
They did it.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
now Moldova, they have a different scenario. And then let's say that comes to pass. Again, we're not giving percentages here. What message is that sent to Georgia?
No,
Okay.
yeah, exactly. That Georgia's, of course, very difficult because
Oh,
physics.
it's more difficult, but who
It's
would have, I'm sorry, I'll
right.
repeat myself. Who would have thought the EU would cancel an election in Romania?
That's right. That's exactly. No, I think they pulled it off in Romania. There wasn't the huge protests and so on that they may have expected. So they were emboldened by the fact that they were able to do this in Romania. Oh, yes, but Maia Sandu may well have told Brussels, I mean, this if this election goes badly, I'm going to have to, basically just annul it. And then I don't know how the public will react. And once you've had an election and then you annul the election and all the results, chances are people will be a little upset. Who knows how people might respond if you annul an election. And I think she probably did go to Brussels and say, "Do I have your support? Will you come in and help?" And they say, "Yeah, absolutely, you have our
And
support."
of course, we can do this because we will pitch it as a move against Russian
Yeah.
encroachment.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's how they're going to justify it. We had to do it because Russia was on the brink of invasion. And then and you say, where's the evidence? And people say, like us or others, where's your evidence that Russia was on the brink of invasion? Give us some time. And
It's classified.
it's classified, but give us a few weeks and we'll come up with a Mickey
Well,
Mouse
I mean,
ridiculous story about how the Russians were on the brink of invasion.
George is absolutely right. If it were to happen, again, we're not putting percentages on this here, but if it were to happen, it will be we'll clean it up later. Okay.
Exactly. It,
I
it
mean,
took the, it took them some
they're
time.
not going to worry about that,
Right.
George.
It took them some time to come up with the whole story with Georgescu, and they still have not really come up with even a remotely plausible story. The whole thing about Russian interference on behalf of Georgescu, but it took them time. They had nothing. They absolutely had nothing on the day that they just simply canceled the election. So yeah, I mean, after a while, yeah, then they're going to come up with a map, and here, well, this is a map. We have these Russians are here, and so on. Like, but hey, can you show us some satellite pictures? No, we can't. Satellite pic, that's classified.
And then 2 weeks later, they'll provide pictures, but they'll be very grainy. Okay.
Exactly. I remember when they did that with, remember when the shooting down of the Malaysian airliner, and that took them also some time to come up with the story of the somehow it was shot down by the pro-Russian forces, and they had a map, and then somebody they drew a line on a ruler here. This is how the missile was launched here. The plane was hit there, and then they draw a line with a ruler. That's it. That's as persuasive
Yeah.
as I wanted. That
When
line
the
drawn with a ruler.
when the
Absolutely.
NSA is looking at every square inch of the
Yeah,
Earth's surface, yeah, that right.
exactly. Exactly. Um, and here's the SVR. And then the outcome of the election will be closely watched in Brussels and other European capitals, where officials fear Moscow could gain a foothold in a strategically vital region as it intensified its hybrid war across the
God,
continent.
wow, this is such hysterical writing.
I know, but I always like it also could gain a foothold. Well, Russia is a part of Europe. I mean, even if it gains a foothold, I mean, it is there. Russia does exist. I mean, they just want to pretend to themselves that Russia
Oh,
just doesn't even exist. Yeah, Moldova kind of matters to Russia strategically. Well, it could gain a foothold. Oh my God.
yeah, but to the morons that wrote this, but Moldova has a foot in Russia.
Exactly. That's right. It's the way they were, for instance, when they had recently these the maneuvers, the Zapad maneuvers, and they say these maneuvers are taking place on NATO's doorstep. Wow, wow, on NATO's doorstep. I'm sorry, but Russia and Belarus exist. They're there. Then they didn't sort of say, hey, I think we're going to take up residence on NATO's doorstep. They kind of exist there. They kind of pre-exist. NATO. They pre-exist.
Yeah,
The
well, I mean, if
expansion
it's
of NATO, they're there, but they're on NATO's doorstep. Russia is on
yeah, but
NATO's doorstep.
if
How
it's
dare it?
if it's NATO's doorstep, it's Russia's porch.
Exactly, exactly. Um, and then it says in
Here we go
September,
in September. Yeah.
that's September, leaders from France, Germany, and Poland traveled to Chisinau to show support for Moldova's EU aspirations and warn against Russian interference. And here's Zelensky, always on hand to chime in. Zelensky echoed that message at the UN General Assembly in New York this week. Europe cannot afford to lose Moldova too, he said, warning that Georgia and Belarus had already fallen under Moscow's sway.
But isn't it a very interesting phrasing there? In September, leaders from France, Germany, and Poland traveled to Chisinau to show support for Moldova's EU aspirations. Does that include or preclude a democratic process?
It precludes the democratic process, but whenever they do this, it's always they say, yeah, okay, but what about those people in Moldova who are not interested in the EU aspirations and who are not interested in a path to the EU? They don't really count. All those people, they just don't count. I mean, each time we have these elections, basically, Maia Sandu, ekes out a very narrow victory with a massive amount of cheating. And all they can say is, "Oh, we're Moscow, Moscow, Moscow." Well, maybe she's just not popular. Maybe that position, Moscow, 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 has resonance in Moldova. Then maybe they don't want to go into the EU. They're not a part. They don't want to go into this whole, existential Western civilization mode. That doesn't count. Merz, Dodon, and not Dodon, Tusk, and Macron, they don't acknowledge any of that. They just take Maia Sandu as representative of all Moldovans.
Yeah, but so many Moldovans, they don't want to be cut off from the Russian world at all.
Exactly.
They have family there, remittances.
Right.
I mean, for a lot of Moldovans, it's borderless. I mean, again the way they frame the Moldo. I mean, a lot of Moldovans would fear losing contact with the Russian world and their families and their financial well-being. I mean, if I were many of these Moldovans, I'd be very afraid because if you have a fraudulent election, the specter of violence being used against you. You have very little recourse.
Yep.
And we're
Right.
talking about, again, I need to stress it, and it never is mentioned in any of these articles. It's a very poor place.
Right. Right. Um, I think we're going to know the results very shortly, and I have to think that they'll steal it. They've done it before. They have a track
Oh,
record.
George, they put
They
in too much
in
money.
plain sight.
No, no, no. They put in too much money.
They
No,
put
no.
in too much money, and they will pull it out, and then later on this evening, we will be hearing from Ursula von der Leyen. We're going to be hearing from Kaja Kallas. We'll be hearing from Friedrich Merz and Emmanuel Macron, who will be hailing Moldovans for their wise and far-sighted choice of Europe, and that they're putting behind the terrible
Yeah,
Western
it'll
path.
be if it goes in her way, they've shown their agency. But if it doesn't go their way, they have no agency. You can't have both at the same
No,
time.
exactly. Then he goes. That's right. If it doesn't go her way, I mean, for them not to be able to pull this off, you have to be truly imbecilic. I mean, you've banned all the political parties, you've persecuted all your opponents, you've banned all the television stations, you've banned observers from the OSCE, anyone that you
You have
don't think
people
like.
under house arrest.
Exactly. You've poured in, I don't know how much money. You've threatened the people over the consequences if they vote the wrong way, and then you still can't win like that. I mean, that would be very difficult. But yeah, I mean, but if it does just by chance go the wrong way, then I think they're going to get the big guns out. I mean, they're not going to accept a defeat. They're just not going to accept it. And so Quite how they're going to pull it off, I imagine probably they would just simply annul the results of the election. Say Russian interference was so huge that this election is null and void.
Yeah, poor Moldova. I know many Moldovans here. That's why they're here, because it's a mess there. It's an absolute, in the Sandus, she's very photographic, photogenic, and she's in Western capitals and all that. The new Moldova. Well, yeah, for her and her clique of people that are well funded, moneyed by European elites and NGOs and all that. Yeah, that's a great life for them. But m most people in Moldova have been left behind. That's why they've been sagging in the polls so badly because they haven't met any of their promises. So, yeah, this is all about, the anti-Russia campaign. This is about NATO expansion. Oh, if they somehow finagle this, we need to push ahead
Yeah,
with
yeah.
NATO. All the more reason to join
Yeah,
NATO.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, 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 yeah. And I think the opposition politicians, it's not going to be a very happy time for them. I mean, I think that they're all kind of facing prison time, and they're all kind of on house arrest. I mean, if I were an opposition politician, I'd get out of Moldova and absolutely don't go to an EU country because they're going to extradite you. So you have to go far and far away. But yeah, I mean that's basically this is I mean it's a classic case of a police state. So it's a police state created by the EU. This is what it is. Now the EU is in the business of creating police states
Well,
because
yes, Schmidt, I think, George, you have accidentally stumbled upon their true values.
right, values exactly
That's their true. They show their, the EU really does show its face in Moldova. They really show how ugly it is.
right.
Okay, because the fate of this little country, it has nothing to just like when these people talk about Ukraine, it's not about Ukraine. It's about a strategic defeat against
Yes.
Russia,
Right.
and this is what Moldova is too. It's just cannon fodder.
Right.
Okay, it's not going to make their lives any better. Probably make it a lot worse.
Right. Exactly.
Alrighty. So guess what, everyone? What we're going to talk about tomorrow during our live stream.
That's right.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. This is
That's it.
Gaggle with Peter and George. As I just said, we're going to have a live stream tomorrow at 10. Sorry, I missed last week, but I'm very happy to be back in the saddle again. 10 o'clock Eastern time.
10 o'clock. Yeah.
Who knows what else, but I think that's what we're going to focus our attention on.
We're going to focus our
Have
attention.
questions. Make up some on our
Exactly.
local page. Send out the question. George is very good at going to them. If you want to come and troll us, we have nothing else to do. I guess why not? Okay. I'm good not to be you. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. We love answering questions, good, tough, challenging questions. We enjoy that. And then, one thing we don't enjoy is the anger, the hot breath of rage from the dogs who immediately start, yeah, but I mean, nothing going on
You
here.
care more about Sandu than us.
Exactly. I mean, they think, well, what the hell's going on? I mean, we keep checking the tip jar, nothing's happening, and they're absolutely enraged. And so, in order to calm them down, to give us an easier way of life, look at that. I mean, this is, you want to mess with Buddy. I certainly wouldn't. So, if you have any money lying around, any used $100 bills that you would like to dispose of, the tip jar is there. And Buddy is overseeing it. We're very grateful for
Hmm.
all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve on the technology. And above all, we're going to be able to just handle these angry dogs, which is very, very difficult. Remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye bye.